Okay, but even that speech, when you look through it, compared to perhaps the previous ones, where a lot of people will look at the previous speeches and say, well, if they juxtapose it with what they see, they have lots of questions. But with this one, he talks about the economy, the auto industry, the micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, jobs, how they say they should create 3 million jobs per year, the national conference, the victim support fund. These are more like things that he's done, saying, well, we still have some steps or grounds to cover. So do you think that that difference is that when people juxtapose what he said with what they find on the ground, and then the aspect of believability of what he said?
I think that's the problem. Let me give the president one interesting credit. His communication pattern is improving. And I'm happy about that, because at an early stage when he first became president, I wish somebody would coach him on communication skills. And I'm glad he's taking on board that. I guess that comes from being a learning person. But the question of believability, I was listening to Mr. Clark, the SAN, who was talking earlier on, and he was talking about the fact that there is still a serious question of believability, because a lot of things are said that are not exactly that way on the ground. Give you a simple example, power. I mean, 2 years ago, I watched the president say on channels that our people were happy with the power situation. Now, I ran my generator in my office throughout yesterday, so I don't know how happy I am with the power situation to run the situation. Now, that's something I can touch, and it hasn't significantly improved. It improved for a short 1 or 2 months, and where everything seemed, and I was excited about it. And then it went back. Now, I have a suspicion that the president has invested resources in trying to get the power situation correct. I also have a strong suspicion that the feedback he's getting is saying that we are a significant way to sorting it out. But the problem is that a lot of that is not true. A lot of it is, I don't know, call it spin and issues. Even, I had KBC make a statement. The connection between the people in office, one of the dangers of getting to office in a country like, generally speaking, all over the world, but it's worse in a country like Nigeria, where the number of sycophants are to a penny around the place. You know, you get surrounded by people, everything is well.
Okay, let me even drop this, because when we talk about the improvement, or when the president or the presidency talks about improvement in the power sector, maybe people could assume it's a blanket improvement they talk about, but it should be segmented. For instance, there are times that people say, well, we've seen a lot of improvements. I mean, sometimes my colleagues said they saw a lot of improvement, but I didn't, but I couldn't say anything, because yes, if they were, that existed at the time. So there are times that you have that improvement, and other times it dips.
Yes.
But the administration of that sector has a big question mark, because if that policy, he's put in that policy, they say, well, this is well intended on paper, but those who are administering it, for instance, now, almost everybody will tell you about how inconveniencing the bills they pay, how they bring you those estimated bills and all of those that they don't even come to read. Now, that's a question.
Yeah. Yes, but you know, many times I've been on channels and I've made a statement consistently that any plan, the road to hell, that's one of my favorite quotes, is paved with good intentions. Any plan you put in place and you do not follow it up thoroughly. I was discussing with KBC earlier, and I said to him, leadership requires a number of things. Number one, it requires a vision. Number two, it requires the mobilization of the people. And number three, it requires strategies. And those strategies are a combination of the mobilization of the people and the resources and the vision that you set. Now, if I say I want to set up a place like Channels, that's my intention. Great idea. Now, if Channels did not do the work of ensuring that they got a Chamberlain and a Mokbe to be here and people like the program, then it falls down at that point. And at the end of the day, when we assess Channels, our conclusion about Channels would not be whatever the founder had in mind. It would be that Channels is not succeeding in hitting what it set out to hit. Now, if you do not have a proper process, because one of the big challenges I would tell you that happens in Nigeria is, and I started with that, is that we make statements from presidents and governors and even MDs. I want to say what I'm saying, it's not just about governance, it's about even the private sector. MDs make statements about our company is going to be in the next 2 years doing this. That statement is only a beginning. To show a commitment to that statement, you need to start with, in fact, my number one issue is you need to start with what Jim Collins says, first who, then what. You need to ensure that the persons all the way down to the base are all properly chosen. You can't choose, for example, a World Cup team to go represent Nigeria, and you pick a player on that team who is a -1. I wouldn't want to go into the analysis of what happened at the World Cup, but summarily you had a -1 in the game against France. And you were playing 10 against 11, even though there were 11 people on the field. Once one player got injured, his replacement did not fit the bill.
But we know that you also need elements of luck. You can have the best team.
Oh, yes, that you
but
can.
A championship side
That's
can
great.
come and drop
You
a Premier League side, maybe like 4-0.
That, correct. But then at that point, we call it an upset. And everybody knows that an upset has taken place. But when you don't get it right, for example, in terms of, well, I'm just saying your personnel. That's the way I'm cutting that. If you don't get your personnel right, which is your first thing, and the personnel are not chosen, I mean, take a classic example. One of the areas that this government has been celebrated for is agric, basically. Now, when you look at the person in charge of agric and you look at his track record, and I don't just mean that he has worked in agricultural sectors, but his track record of also having a certain reputation for a level of credibility and honesty about what he's been doing, you can begin to see that, okay, somehow along the line, you went for somebody because of what he was bringing. So when the president says, I believe in agric, it's credible. But it doesn't stop there. The person who you put there has to now go on and say, if I'm going to ask someone to go and take care of agric in Sokoto, the person must also fit the same bill. You know, one of the challenges we have sometimes, and I must confess, is that in managing the politics of the nation, of a heterogeneous nation, sometimes the issue of what we sometimes call federal character and all those personnel issues sometimes take a precedence over.
Do we appreciate that part?
We do, but my challenge, I'll tell you, is that while that is there, it's not an excuse for non-performance.
When do you think this vision that you're talking about should have been set? Because we're celebrating 54 years, you know,
Yes.
should it have been set when we were when we're getting independence, or should every administration set its own vision?
Personally speaking, I think a vision is a long-term thing. So probably we should have set something when we were starting as a nation. Although I think, and I may be wrong, that the earlier governments that we had tended to do a bit of that. I mean, there was a first and second national development plan, which were 5-year plans, and they helped us move to where we are. Actually, a lot of things we are still reaping were the products of those first and second and third national development plans developed during Gowon eras and entering into Murtala Obasanjo eras the first time. Now, every administration after could also set a vision for its term in office. But also, I'm looking forward to an administration that will set a long-term vision for the nation, generally speaking, that becomes a vision that is well set, is a compelling motivation to move in a direction.
Isn't that what they all intend to do, except that when the next administration comes forward, they have to bring their own agenda to the table?
No, I'm not sure that's what they intend to do, because you need to set up the vision with information and knowledge. You need to, I've always said it, and I've said it here before, that one of our big challenges as a nation is our short-termist thinking. 4 years in the life of a nation is a short term. Now, if, say, Chamberlain becomes president of Nigeria, and you come up with a 25-year plan that is properly well developed about a vision that that resonates with all of us. You see, a vision is not good intentions. It's not aspirations. It is the dream of a nation. That's why it's sustained fundamentally. If you start by saying, take Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream, and that dream is so long-term, but all of us can buy into it. Like there is no Nigerian government that comes in place that does not look, that would not want to look forward to a nation when the average man on the street is involved in his self-development. I was hearing Kabisi talk about the fact that a typical Nigerian, I think it was Mr. Clark who was saying, the typical Nigerian is not wanting to go and be collecting money from government. If you give him a chance, now everybody can buy into that. The question is, the vision processing is a rigorous process. And what's been affecting us as a nation is that, one, we're not ready to go through that rigorous process, which starts with getting the right people to coordinate the process itself. We're not ready to answer the difficult questions that those people have to ask themselves. Like I always say, the Japanese say, until you ask 5 whys, you don't get an answer. We're not ready to answer difficult questions. And especially when you get into leaders, I've said it together, you have too many people who want to tell you how beautiful and how good you are. And it tempts your ego. So you now surround yourself with that group of people. Instead of sending yourself with people who can say, we can be better than we are.
And that's doing you more harm than good.
Yeah, it's doing not just the leader more harm than good. It's doing all of us more harm than good. Because we all become victims of this psychophancy. And when you start to say, Mr. President, one day I said something here and someone called me and said, we're going to get you arrested. It was joking, but he meant it. He said, why you criticize? I said, I'm not criticizing the president. I want my president to be the best president in the world. It suits me when he's the best president. I benefit. We all gain. So let my president be better than he is. And then I'll be excited because the nation gets better. And I eat.
All right, well, that's where we have to draw the curtain today on this extended version of Sunrise Daily, Nigeria at 54. It's been interesting having you on, Mr. Adetokunbo Obayan, a leadership consultant. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Always my pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap today on Sunrise Daily. Thank you for watching. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Oh, thank you. I'm Maope Ogun.